whatever the path is to get to that point, if we don't have trust, if our patients don't trust the decisions that we're collectively coming to with them, and if there are things that are around that can weaken that, that's a challenge. And I'll tell you, I mean, we were talking about this at the very beginning. If we have an entity that's talking, and this is, just more general of the things that we've seen about, well, you can't use anything off label. It's got to be on label. You can't, this medication isn't approved for this condition, so you can't use it for that condition. Well, if that's where we're going to start to go, or if that's what winds up happening with some of the things that you're talking about, I agree with you. I think it's going to be a challenge to maintain the longevity of the doctor-patient relationship in eye care. And I actually think the most important thing for me is that that's a detriment to patients, and yes, it's a detriment to our profession, but it's a detriment to patients first. And then, just like rising tides elevate all ships, sinking tides will do the same. And we've got to be careful. We've got to really be careful.
Yep. I want to go back just a little bit. There was talking about starting up a practice again. Starting a cold start. The second time was way better because those 3 years that I was with the big group, my patient base just ballooned. And so to get that patient base to just expand like crazy and then go about 2.5, 3 miles down the street and open up, it was an ideal way to start. I mean, so all the metrics of like what you can expect, I blew those out of the water, but it was kind of cheating because I've been in practice for 14 years by then, or 13 years. So it's not really fair. It's not really just a cold startup. But I was talking to my brother, my oldest brother, and I told him how excited I was to kind of start over again. And he was saying, but why? I mean, I don't get it. Like, what's the appeal? And I said, well, think about it this way. If you got out of college and the first house that you bought, that you didn't buy a house, you built a house.
Yeah.
And you were, 22 years old, and that's what you thought you wanted to do. It was, that's great. You can change that house all you want, but you're limited by what you've already done to a certain extent. And, and here it is, you're 15 years later, and you have a chance to just raise that house and build it again. That house looks a lot different that second time because you have this experience to build on, all the mistakes that you made the first time. And it's a blessing to have a blank slate, and it's exciting. And, what would your practice look like if you were forced to start again? And it's kind of fun. Well, not just kind of fun. It was really fun. I've really enjoyed it. We have like I said, amazing facility. My staff is top of the line. I mean, I can't say enough good stuff about them. We really have fun together. And yeah, it's like having just built a house that suits me perfectly right now.
So the last question I'll ask you, can you, without going through what you went through, can you be 15 years into practice and raise that house and rebuild it the way you want to? I mean, anybody without leaving a physical location and a physical entity, can you just say, look, I'm redesigning my practice? Or do you think it has to be an evolution that takes time?
I think that, imagine if you have to have a surgery, you don't get an option for that, and you come out better on the other end. Was that something that you would wake up on a Saturday morning and say, I think I'd like to have someone go in and redo my heart, and kind of reconfigure the vessels around it? Like, no way. It took a crisis, and it takes a crisis for you to do that. And I think theoretically, it'd probably be a great business move if people that have been in practice for 15 years would do that and just say, you know what, I'm going to start over. Hey, everybody, we're going to shut down for 3 months and we are going to do this thing right. But it would take a crisis to do that. I think the thing that we probably see the most is people running out of space and then building a nice new practice and all that. So that happens, but that's more of something you plan on, and it kind of work into that, and it's a dream that's realized over time. Yeah, so I think that's another one of those things. In my case, is unique. I think that I had to go through that as kind of a jolt and a wake up call to get me to that place where I could start building again.
Shakabuki.
What?
It's a swift kick to the head that completely alters your reality.
Yes.
You know what the first time I heard that was? There's a movie from the late 90s called Grosse Pointe Blank. Yes. Yep. It's one of my favorites of all time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's so funny you said that, because I just watched a clip of that on YouTube. Which one? Bing, bing, ding, popcorn. The song is Under Pressure by Queen.
Oh my gosh. That is like that's like one of my favorite scenes of all time.
Having this existential moment with this baby, and they're staring at each other. Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh. That is like, yeah, I get goosebumps when I think about that.
And what brought that up was one of my workers told me to watch.
Hello and welcome to the Chris Will Podcast on iCode Media. Today I had a great conversation with my longtime friend, Dr. Steve Miller, who practices in Hutchinson, Kansas. And we talked about his path from private practice to selling to a large group practice. Then that practice winds up selling to private equity, and he decides to open another private practice. And it's a great story that he has to tell. I had a lot of fun talking to Steve, as I always do. And please enjoy our conversation. As always, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, write a review, share it with your friends, and support those who support us. I want to talk about the MyDay multifocal for a second. It's just coming out, and we had the opportunity to do a preclinical trial with this lens this last summer. And there were a couple things that I thought were really helpful. The first one is that it is different than a lot of the multifocals that we've used before in our practices, where patients, especially early emerging presbyopes, really managed it didn't cause a lot of additional distance blur for them. And the other thing that was really helpful was, because we've never been involved in a clinical trial before, was to understand the sort of questions that we might ask our patients. And we ask our patients a lot of questions about their satisfaction with a contact lens, but what we weren't doing was actually having them score that themselves. So one of the parts of this that was really interesting to me was asking patients on a scale of 1 to 10 how they would score their vision, how they would score their comfort in their current lenses, and then how they would do the same on their new lenses. And it showed me a lot of times where patients would say they were happy, might rate their vision as a 6 or a 7, and then it also reframed their thinking about their current satisfaction in their lenses and allowed me to open up the door to offering other solutions. So if you haven't tried something like that in your clinical practice, I would encourage you to, and I would also encourage you to try the MyDay multifocal for your patients. I guess I want to hear, because I don't really know the in-depth details of building the practice that you built for so many years, deciding to sell that practice, and then the practice that you sold to flips to private equity. And then you decide, hey, I don't want to be a part of this. I want to start my practice again.
Right.
So let's talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So, I started to practice cold, and you always hear about these, start a practice hot. No, it was cold. It was pretty rough in a small town, central Kansas. And my thought was, when you invest in a small town like that, I expected people to just really reciprocate, to really support it, and I was wrong to a certain extent. There were some people that did that, but I think it's a testament to the relationship that eye doctors have with their patients. I look back and I'm like, that's asking a lot because I've got good eye doctors in here. My colleagues are awesome.
Because they were people lived in that town, but they didn't have any eye care. They were driving to another town. And they just had a relationship.
Absolutely. And so, that once a year that something comes up that, I need my eyes checked again, I'm out of contacts, whatever. I can go, 20 miles, which is probably where I'm working anyway. or it's where I get buy most of my groceries or whatever. Or this guy's here. I don't know anything about this guy other than he likes our town. So it was slow going, and it was really rough. And I've talked to a number of new grads or upcoming grads over the years, and try not to be Debbie Downer on it, but I'm saying, like, you better know what you're getting into, because this is a hard road. It's really difficult, and to start out from scratch, and first generation optometrist in the family, so no background and all that, and so we built it up. It was in my kind of naivety. I was making some poor business decisions. My marketing budget was way over, because I was supporting everything, trying to support, and you know what? You just can't build a healthy business when you're not taking home good money to pay for groceries. So it took me a number of years, and we got to this point where we were growing and we were fairly comfortable, but it was hard to kind of turn the ship too, and to get it to grow the right way. And part of that was my staff was pretty old fashioned. And so I was burdened, I was long hours. I was spending long hours there. I was doing some work in a local prison here a couple times a month to make ends meet. And it was actually fun. I enjoyed that, and made good money doing that. And then it got to this point where, kind of out of the blue, this large group practice, 20 locations, they contacted me in the town that I lived in and said, "Hey, I want to take you out to dinner. Are you interested at all?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm interested in hearing." Now, I'm always interested in hearing.
Right, sure. Right.
And went out to dinner, and we came away from that. I remember it very well because Johnny Cueto was pitching Game 5 of the American League Championship Series back in 2015 for the Royals, and they beat the Astros to move on to the World Series that night. So big time for me. And we left there, and my wife said, "Wow, I don't think we have any interest in that." And I said, "I'm very interested in that," because what appealed to me and what I wasn't letting her in on was the stress that I was dealing with always thinking about work. And so to be able to show up to work, my first patient's at 8:00. I could show up at, 8:15, and right about the time the patient's being seated in the exam room, and walk in and see my first patient. And at, about 10 till 5, I was out the door driving home, and so that first year was like honeymoon phase. It was fantastic. I was given this great crew, well-trained, all the best equipment. It was a dream. I really enjoyed it.
So I'm going to pause you there real quick. So you started your practice right out of school, 2007?
2005.
2005. Okay. Then 2005, you build it up, and 2015. So you'd been in practice for 10 years. You grew the practice for 10 years. When did you go from that first conversation to when you decided to sell to this group, which was a private group, but a large group practice, right?
Exactly. First meeting was October of 2015.
Okay. We
pretty much agreed on terms in April of 2016.
Okay.
So 6 months.
And then did you, and in that practice, as part of the purchase agreement, did you have any ownership or stock in that other practice, or you completely sold it?
Right. So I completely sold my practice. And since I brought a book of patients with me and a decent practice, so we agreed on a price, and it was a pretty fair price. All we could get, we tried. I mean, I had someone negotiating on my behalf. We had an accountant and business associate, or business coach, I guess, a local accountant that kind of specializes in mergers and acquisitions. He really went to bat and got a lot of stuff. He was worth every penny. Just a good guy. But one thing we couldn't do was get them to commit to a timeline of ownership. All we could get is, "Hey, this is our MO. When you come to us with a practice, we're going to benefit pretty much right from the start. So you'll work with us for about 3 years. If you're a team player, if we feel like we're compatible, whatever, you become an owner at that point." The 3 years, the first 3 years, you're not making a whole lot of money. It was decent, but it wasn't like, it wasn't great. But by doing that, you're kind of buying in right there. and you don't actually purchase the ownership share. What happens is you forego your dividends for a certain number of years after you're an owner, and then you get like another chunk after that. So that was all we could get. And I understand that. And their thought was like, we're not committing to ownership. We haven't even worked with you.
We don't know you. Yeah.
Okay. And we tried and tried. They couldn't budge on that. So, but that had always been their MO. I mean, when you look at all the owners and I, these are colleagues, so I know them, and it seemed to hold true. The second year was when we went from, a straight salary plus bonus to performance only. And so my first year, there's kind of a standard salary. And then depending on how much revenue you're generating, you get these nice bonuses. Well, I was in the top tier of the bonuses. Out of I think there were like probably 20 employee doctors, probably 15 ODs and 5 MDs that were employees. And, I was producing well. I was the number 2 producer. The number 1 was a retinal specialist. And then of course, a nice big gap down to me.
Right.
And then a glaucoma specialist and some general ophthalmology and stuff like that. But I was working my tail off. I wanted to prove myself, and
it was in the same location that you had owned.
Yes, and another one. So I was split the time between one in my hometown that I lived in and one in the small town in my practice.
And so I want to kind of pause there, because before you had been pretty much just at your practice. Were you still doing fill-in days other places before you sold, or you were just primarily at your practice?
I had a lease at a Walmart store, about an hour away. And I had another doctor from a different town that was working for me most of the time there. And then I would go there occasionally as well.
So then basically they took once they purchased your practice, they said, we're going to consolidate, probably, I would guess. They put in more toys, try to get you more efficient, consolidated those patients into certain time frames, and then said, hey, Steve, we need you over here as well.
Right, exactly.
Okay, all right. I'm with you. Just keep going.
And it was nice. I got to keep my building. So I gained rent on that and everything, and that was fine. When we were in discussion with them, one of the main questions I asked is, what is the average net? Because when you go to a production-based payment system, then you keep like a certain percentage of your net, which, incentivizes you to keep your costs down and all that. They told me what the average net was, and I thought that's a pretty good net.
Well, so I'm going to pause you there again too, because there are things in that net that you can't control, right? In theory, you can keep your costs down. Exactly. But if they want to put a new widget in, or they want to hire another person, or they want to, change the light bulbs, you can't control that.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's where we went wrong. Now, my thought was, what is the average net? That should kind of cover it. What I found out was the CFO had no idea. We got into it, and when I expected about a 40% raise on year number 2, I basically stayed flat. I mean, it was a huge change. I was like, wait a second, what's going on? So monthly meetings with the COO and the CFO saying, what's going on here? Like, I was told this. I have emails that say this. And, well, you have more expenses than normal. What are you talking about? Like, you had all my expenses. And so it was pretty contentious. And I was thinking, what have I gotten into? I still want to be a team player because I want to be an owner in 2 years and that sort of thing. So, to what extent do you gripe about it, or just suck it up and work on?
Yeah.
So it was pretty rough. And I got pretty frustrated over time. The way some of the expenses were allocated, like there was one office as I was at, there were four providers there, and all the office overhead, rent, front office or front desk staff, optical staff, all of that was allocated by the month by how much revenue, percentage of revenue you generated.
Hmm.
So what that means is that, the other 3 practitioners, if one of them takes a 2-week vacation and the other 2 take a week off, I'm suddenly footing the bill for a huge number or a huge
Interesting. Interesting.
And that actually came up one month where I talked to the CFO and I said, look, next month I'm going to take time off because I'm going to get penalized by working harder here. And here's why. And she's, well, I don't think it works that way. I said, it certainly works that way. And I think at that point I said something to the effect of, I'm done with taking one for the team here. This is all about me taking care of my family right now. And I'm sorry it has to be that way, but I'm not showing up to work and paying extra just to come to work. I would rather take the week off and spend it with my family. And I'm sorry if that's offensive, but that's just where I am. And yeah, I understand. So it got to the point that I had a meeting with some owners that they set up, that the COO set up, and kind of gave them an ultimatum. And that was in October of 2018.
So a year before you and I, just to give you the listeners some perspective, you and I get to reconnect every so often. And that would have been probably a year before we reconnected. So I think we would text back and forth, but I think where we've actually had an opportunity to sit down and talk about this, that was probably October 2019.
Actually, yeah.
When you and I think that's right.
Yes.
So okay. So
I said 18 or 19. This was October of 18.
Yes. Right.
And
yeah. Okay. So I'm in my mind, I'm kind of picturing the conversations we've had over time, so I can plug it into where you were at when we were having those conversations. Okay. All right. So October 2018, you have a sit down with the owners.
And said, either you pay me what you said you're going to pay me, or let me walk away. Just let me leave. Hey, it didn't work out. And, and I got the, yeah, we really need to look at that. Yeah. Hey, we'll get on that. 2 months later, we had our annual meeting. And at the end of that meeting, they let all the owners leave and they just wanted to have a meeting with the employees. And I remember this was, 2.5 years in. And I was thinking, I remember leaving the house thinking, this could be the day. This could be the day where they pull me aside and say, you know what, you're getting rewarded. You're going to be an owner. Yeah. And it was just the opposite. They had us all together and said, guess what, we're selling to private equity. And I did not handle that well. I'll be honest. I was in this meeting. I raised my hand and piped up and said, how does this affect our non-compete clauses? Which is not, it's a competitive thing to say, but I was pretty emotionally charged at that time.
Yeah.
And so I knew right then, like, this is not what I signed up for. And so it was a matter of trying to figure out how I was going to leave. So that was a Christmas party. So that was December of 18. We weren't allowed to say anything to coworkers or anything like that. And it was about 3 months later, they kind of broke the news. Maybe 2 months later, they broke the news to the staff. So the office managers would talk to each staff member. My team was in my office manager and my scribe and my 2 technicians. And she explained it. And one of them said, how does this affect you? And I said, not good. I'm going to leave. And my one technician said, I'm coming with you. And the next one said, me too. So I had 4 immediately that wanted to, but because
why do you think that there was already that perception that things weren't going to go the way they wanted them to go? That, like, what about being in a private practice that has a lot of owners and a lot of locations, still probably from the sounds of it runs similarly to a private equity firm, or maybe even more similarly to a corporate practice than a independent, like a single location, single doctor, or multiple doctor, single location private practice. But what were they aware of? What do you think they were aware of when you told them immediately to say, this is not what I want?
We had the way that it was set up, as I look back at that culture, it was pretty segmented. Like my team was my team. If you think about kind of like a conference, you're in Cornhusker country, so you guys are now part of the Big Ten, and so yeah, I mean, there's this brotherhood of Big Ten, but you're Nebraska fans, and then there's Michigan fans, and there's Iowa fans, and we were kind of like that. Like my team, we thought we were the best. And so, my scribe and my two technicians, we were tight. I mean, we'd go out to eat together and whatever. And we'd laugh at the others because they do it this way, so there's this kind of friendly rivalry, and it was friendly. I mean, I had great coworkers there. But I think I did not have a good poker face for those few months. I think they got a real sense of what was going on. And so when I said I'm leaving, their first thought was, hey, we're a team. We're all going together. That couldn't happen because of the way the contract was structured. So my one technician, she was with me before I joined this group. So I could take her with me. I could legally ask her to come with me.
Because she was already with you before.
Exactly. She was carved out of my non-solicitation clause. Yeah. And so the others, and so I said, I would love it, but I can't ask any of you to come. But yes, I would love to have you. And so that's kind of where it began. And they asked me, so I went ahead and well, it was really frustrating too, because we didn't know who we were working for. We know which group was buying the practice, but we didn't know the structure. And so we were given contracts that were just blank of like who was involved in the contract. Well, I'm not giving that to my attorney. And my attorney told me, don't ever sign anything if you're pressured into it. Don't ever do that. Steve promised me this, that sort of thing. And so this went along and not much was happening. And I was at a state OA meeting. And this was on a Thursday at about 2:00 in the afternoon. We got emails, and this is your final contract. So for the first time, a full contract to look over.
Was that the meeting that I saw you at, or was it the meeting before?
That was the meeting.
It was a board meeting. Yeah, it was a board meeting or something.
Right. Maybe it was a board meeting in October of that year. This would have been in April of that year.
Okay.
And so a Thursday afternoon, hey, this is your contract. We need all doctors to sign it by 1:00 tomorrow. It was less than 24 hours. And I called the COO and I said, what happens if I don't sign it? What do you mean? I said, I guess I just need to know, am I going to have a job on Monday? Are you guys changing the locks? What do we do? Well, why wouldn't you sign it? And I said, well, first of all, the non-compete clause is one thing, and I'm not signing anything on short notice that changes that. And we had a dispute over what my non-compete clause said. And I actually had a buyout in mind and nobody else did. So kudos to the negotiator that I didn't even know was doing that. That was one thing he worked in there. And so she said, you don't have a buyout. I said, I think I do. No, you don't. Nobody does. Well, that another frantic call to my attorney. He goes, relax, you do. It's very clear. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Anyway, so what happens if I don't sign it? And about 3 hours later, I got a text back that said, the attorneys are not willing to discuss that.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. And I remember at that conference, talking to friends, and they're like, so what are you gonna do? I was like, I'm not signing it. There's no way. I'm not gonna get bullied into signing a contract. I'm digging my heels in. Does that mean I have a job on Monday? I have no idea. I will see. It was a pretty rough weekend.
Yeah.
I got a phone call on a Sunday morning. I got several calls on Saturday that I didn't answer because I'm like, let's just see what happens. I got a phone call on a Sunday morning. I took that one. I was pretty upset about that one. And they said, well, I'm really sorry. We can come and drive to your town and discuss it. And I said, no, there's no need to do that. I said, I think we're at an impasse. and I'm just going to put my notice in, a 90-day notice that I'm required to do. I'll put that in first thing Monday morning. So they asked me a couple days later, would you be willing to stay longer than 90 days? And I said, no, I don't want to do that. And then they came back with, if you stay till the end of the year, an extra 5 months, we'll knock X amount off of your buyout. Ooh, I like that. So that was a good, easy negotiation. So I stayed on, the lame duck for the rest of the year. Very much worth it for me. As it turns out, that company that bought them, the private equity company, turned around and flipped it and sold it.
Oh, they flipped already?
Yeah. Within a year.
So I think, right after you and I had talked in 2019 at that same KOA meeting, I still haven't disclosed his name because he asked me not to, but I believe he was part of that group that purchased your practice and then flipped, or one of the maybe they lumped a couple, that private equity firm lumped a couple of you all in Kansas together, and then flipped it again. But I didn't realize they flipped and spun off.
Yeah. So one private equity firm bought these two big practices.
Yes. Okay. That's what it was.
And then turned around in March, I think, of 2020.
So like a year and a couple months.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Actually just under a year, because I think the closing date was like early May of 19. Yeah, it was right at a year. And so, I mean, and we knew that. Even the company or the private,
they tell you that right away. Yep.
Like we're looking to flip it. We're in it for the money, and we all know this. And which, that's to their credit. They're not trying to. It's not smoke and mirrors. They know exactly what they're going to do. And I don't fault them for that. I mean, it's business, and I honestly don't think that there were things in the works when I joined. I think it moved fairly quickly. I believe in the kind of the goodwill of the owners, but it was bad timing. And where I'm at right now, I look back and I'm like, I'm glad I went through all that. I really am, because I love where I am right now. I'm having so much more fun and all that. Now, it was pretty rough to get here, but as most things, and for a spiritually minded person like yourself, it's kind of easy to look back and say, yeah, I can see now. That was, it was all meant to be. And so when you're in the thick of it, it's hard to see, but I can see that now.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because my understanding is you're back in private practice.
Exactly.
But you didn't go back to your small town. You went to the slightly bigger town that you kind of live in, suburbs.
Is about 40, between 40 and 45,000. So, medium-sized Kansas town. Draws a little bit bigger than that because we're the biggest town in our county. So we draw more like, 65,000 probably.
Was it easier to set up this practice than the first one because of all the lessons you learned and the location? And
it was so much easier. When we opened up, it was just me and my one worker. And, going, no files, paperless, which is fantastic. Good equipment, good financing. And so my wife and I went to Vision Expo West in 2019, fall of 2019, and for one purpose, and that was to pick out our entire inventory of frames, and all from independent manufacturers. And so finding all those mom and pop places, people whose names we know, that they're actually manufacturing themselves in some cases. And we realized I love selling frames because I know how it affects him and his family and her, and she's the designer and she's awesome. And I like her. And, and it was really fun. And so we promoted that, finding an independent lab for the same reason. And so that's been fun. My kind of right-hand man, lady, we're good friends, and her dad and I are close friends. And so I've known her for years. we started out and it was just us, and it's kind of laughable. We do literally laugh about that because we were way over our heads. All the clinical stuff we were good at, optical stuff we were good at, administrative stuff, no way. We were just cobbling things together. And within just about 3 months, the office manager at one of the big practices that I was at, the larger place, she came and talked to me and said, "Hey, I want to talk to you about maybe coming and joining you guys." And she was like our dream employee because we had worked with her. She was amazing, good fit, great skill set. And since she approached me, we could have that discussion. I couldn't reach out to her.
Oh, right.
And so, and I made it clear. I said, "Well, you're going to have to approach me. I can't approach you." And she said, "Well, this is me approaching you. So can we talk?" And I said, "Let's do it." About 6 months after that, her sister joined us as well. And she also worked in that practice. So great experience, great fit. She had quit there and came and interviewed the same day she quit. Was not good there. And she was great for us and a great fit. So we kind of have our little enclave now on the other side of town, and it is just fun. I mean, we really have a lot of fun together, and I almost feel guilty because I have good friends that gripe about their staff, and we do that. It's a big part of our job, and
but life is way too short to not enjoy, the people you're around and the things you're doing, and I'm a huge believer of like being able to walk into whatever you're doing, whatever the day is, and just being like, yeah, I want to do this today, and that's not to say that I don't sometimes gripe, but the reality is most of the time I'm trying to have fun. And I'm making sure that not only am I the one, and am I having fun, but I provide a good opportunity for other people to come to work and enjoy what they do. And I don't want to make it a spot where people, oh gosh, Monday's coming around, and Dr. Wolf's going to be there today, and I'm not in for that, and I don't need to make people's life harder. I'm trying to make people's lives easier and just enjoy it, and I think that's huge. I mean, and it. I think you and I can kind of dump on certain things. I've got a couple other questions to ask you about this, but it's easy for us to dump on, this type of practice or that type of practice. I mean, there's probably people that really enjoy it that just like what you said, is like, I'm just tired of dealing with all the other stuff of running a business and going through all that kind of stuff. And I want that. Do you think the reason I bring all that up is that was you at one point? So how did that, I mean, you describe all these frustrations with money and with all this other stuff, but like, was it the compensation that eroded it away, or was it the combination of the fact that it was the compensation plus the fact you didn't have, that wasn't being met, the expectations that weren't being met, coupled with the fact that you had less control in your practice? How much did the lack of control have to do with your discontent?
You're talking about in the larger practice.
When you sold your other practice and you sold it to the other practice, you were tired of independent practice after 10 years. And so, but it only took you 2 years to get to tire of the other.
Yeah, it was.
So
it was.
I mean, you focused on the financial aspect of it, but yeah, go ahead.
The culture of the large practice was different, and I felt like my ideals were not reflected. That is, I love making a personal connection with my patients. I feel like, and my undergrad degree is in education, so I have a teaching degree, and that's the way I practice. And that is, I mean, it's what everything is based on. So when people leave, when they say, "Thank you, I had no idea what all this was about. I had no idea that you could see that. I had no idea this and that." That, I love that. Clinically, I love that more than anything. Is people, just the healthy myope, that you can cruise through that exam. I love explaining things and have them go, oh, I get it. Oh, that's great. And because the eye is amazing, the visual system, and I love talking about it. That is not conducive to a large practice where it's turnstiles, you're turning people through. That was part of it. And then, when the owners decided to sell, I'm pretty close to some of those owners. Like they're great people. I really like them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard to work alongside people that I felt like they just kind of hung me out to dry.
Mm.
I think there were creative ways that they could have made, class shares of ownership based on different things to reward the employees. And I was there for, 2.5 years when they announced it. I have friends that are good clinicians and great people that were there for 12, 13, 15 years. Now, they didn't get ownership because they didn't bring a practice with them. So they were building up, but man, great workers and just fantastic people. And I'm thinking I'm this upset and I feel like I got taken advantage of. That guy who also has 6 kids and a fantastic family, he's stuck. He doesn't even have a buyout. And it's hard to work for people with that in my mind. And I didn't like it. I wanted to get away from there as fast as I could get there. Yeah.
So what's the end game with all of this? I mean, again, you could speculate I could speculate all I want, but seeing it from the inside and then probably having those relationships that you have with people who are probably still in some of these places, does it flip again? How many times can it flip? And then at some point, does it crumble? You hear about, read in the history books of private equity being in eye care and being in other spaces of healthcare where, they're coming back to the doctors that they originally bought out, asking them to buy those practices because they're just not they can't run them at scale. So what are your thoughts about that?
It's the golden question, right?
Yeah.
What's the end game? I honestly don't know. I go back and forth on this a lot because I think it's easy for people like you and me to rail against this whole thing. I think we're barreling down a path and we don't know what's at the end. But let's say you're 62 years old. I mean, am I in a position where I can try to urge you to sell to a new grad when you can get 40% more from private equity? I mean, that's really hard for me to stomach. That if I'm out there and very outspoken, who am I in kind of the middle of my career to say what I think that retiring doc should do? Do I think it's good for our industry? No way. I think private equity is probably the worst thing that we're facing. Personally, I think that what it does, the end game, well, maybe not the end game, but the further down the road game, is that we become like pharmacy. We become the plug and play doctors, and doctors might become doctors with air quotes, because you take away all the decision making, you take away the personality, and why would they pay you a good wage when they can get an undergrad or a recent grad that comes in and does the exact same thing? They plug them in there for a lot less money, and suddenly that's what we're filled up with. And I don't see, the online sale of contacts being an issue. I see private equity completely changing our profession.
whatever the path is to get to that point, if we don't have trust, if our patients don't trust the decisions that we're collectively coming to with them, and if there are things that are around that can weaken that, that's a challenge. And I'll tell you, I mean, we were talking about this at the very beginning. If we have an entity that's talking, and this is just more general of the things that we've seen about, well, you can't use anything off label. It's got to be on label. You can't. This medication isn't approved for this condition, so you can't use it for that condition. Well, if that's where we're going to start to go, or if that's what winds up happening with some of the things that you're talking about, I agree with you. I think it's going to be a challenge to maintain the longevity of the doctor-patient relationship in eye care. And I actually think the most important thing for me is that that's a detriment to patients. And yes, it's a detriment to our profession, but it's a detriment to patients first. And then, just like rising tides elevate all ships, sinking tides will do the same. And we've got to be careful. We got to really be careful.
Yep. I want to go back just a little bit. There was talking about starting up a practice again, starting a cold start. The second time was way better because, those 3 years that I was with the big group, my patient base just ballooned. And so to get that patient base to just expand like crazy and then go about 2.5, 3 miles down the street and open up, it was an ideal way to start. I mean, so all the metrics of like what you can expect, I blew those out of the water, but it was kind of cheating because I've been in practice for 14 years by then, or 13 years. So it's not really fair. It's not really just a cold startup. But I was talking to my brother, my oldest brother, and I told him how excited I was to kind of start over again. And he was saying, but why? I mean, I don't get it. Like, what's the appeal? And I said, well, think about it this way. If you got out of college and the first house that you bought, that you didn't buy a house, you built a house.
Yeah.
And you were, 22 years old, and that's what you thought you wanted to do. It was, that's great. You can change that house all you want, but you're limited by what you've already done to a certain extent. And, and here it is, you're 15 years later, and you have a chance to just raise that house and build it again. That house looks a lot different that second time because you have this experience to build on, all the mistakes that you made the first time. And it's a blessing to have a blank slate, and it's exciting. And what would your practice look like if you were forced to start again? And it was kind of fun. Well, not just kind of fun, it was really fun. I've really enjoyed it. We have like I said, amazing facility. My staff is top of the line. I mean, I can't say enough good stuff about them. We really have fun together. And yeah, it's like having just built a house that suits me perfectly right now. So,
so the last question I'll ask you, can you, without going through what you went through, can you be 15 years into practice and raise that house and rebuild it the way you want to? I mean, anybody without leaving a physical location and a physical entity, can you just say, look, I'm redesigning my practice? Or do you think it has to be an evolution that takes time?
I think that imagine if you have to have a surgery, you don't get an option for that, and you come out better on the other end. Was that something that you would wake up on a Saturday morning and say, I think I'd like to have someone go in and redo my heart, and kind of reconfigure the vessels around it? Like, no way. It took a crisis, and it takes a crisis for you to do that. And I think theoretically, it'd probably be a great business move if people that have been in practice for 15 years would do that and just say, you know what, I'm going to start over. Hey, everybody, we're going to shut down for 3 months and we are going to do this thing right. But it would take a crisis to do that. I think the thing that we probably see the most is people running out of space and then building a nice new practice and all that. So that happens, but that's more of something you plan on, and it kind of work into that, and it's a dream that's realized over time. Yeah, so I think that's another one of those things. In my case, is unique. I think that I had to go through that as kind of a jolt and a wake up call to get me to that place where I could start building again.
Shakabuki.
What?
It's a swift kick to the head that completely alters your reality.
Yes.
You know that's from. You know what the first time I heard that was? There's a movie from the late '90s called Grosse Pointe Blank. Yes, yep. It's one of my favorites of all time.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's so funny you said that, because I just watched a clip of that on YouTube. Because
which one? Bing, bing, ding, popcorn.
The song is "Under Pressure" by Queen.
Oh my gosh. What a great, that is like the class. It's like one of my favorite scenes of all time.
He's having this existential moment with this baby, and they're staring at each other. Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh. That is like, yeah, I get goosebumps when I think about that.
And what brought that up was one of my workers told me to watch, it's Kind of a Funny Story, which is a movie that came out a couple years ago. And there's a scene in there where they use the same song, and it's also a fantastic scene, and so it made me think, oh, there was this movie Grosse Pointe Blank that I love, and I went back and watched that clip. But you're right, that's what that's from.
Oh man,
it alters your reality. Minnie Driver said that.
Yeah. Minnie Driver said that. Yep. Steve Miller, thanks for being on, man. This is great.
Chris, it's a blast. Always great to talk to you.
It's good to talk to you too, man. So I'm gonna edit this up, and then I will I'll shoot you over a copy. I'm thinking that it's probably going to be December 13th or December 6th that will come out.
Okay.
Either way, I'll probably edit it up this week, the rest of this week, and then I'll send it over. If there's something you say that you don't want to say, then just tell me, and I'll